on a previous post, I talked about my frustration at seeing again and again some really high-end buildings going up that are detailed in a way that means they're not going to be as thermally efficient as they really should be. Especially when you've got that kind of money, I would expect that the clients are thinking they're getting something that they're actually not. This building may look really flash on the outside, it might be really cool, but it's essentially a building that is going to deteriorate faster because good thermal detailing leads to a building that is more durable. So it's a bit like having a really flash car that is essentially rusting over time. So today I'm going to go through the top 5 things that I've seen across various energy modelling of these types of buildings that make the biggest difference. But if you don't want to listen to the whole post, then please either message me or contact me and I will send you a document that gives you these top 5 things that you should be looking for, especially if you're about to build your own building, design your own building. It's really important. So I'm going to give you these 5, and they're not, the biggest thing I should say is don't think about them in terms of the order. Obviously I'm giving them to you in an order, but essentially it depends on the house and it depends on the design of the house, which one has the biggest influence. But they are the biggest things, and spoiler alert, it's not adding in more insulation. Generally speaking these days, since the code changes in 2023, buildings in New Zealand have got enough insulation. So increasing insulation, there's a point where you're just spending more money and it's a complete waste of your money. So the first one I'm going to talk about is windows. So yes, again and again, windows will make the biggest difference. Getting the most thermally efficient frames that you can get, as well as the best glass that you can get, does make the biggest difference to the thermal efficiency of your building. It typically comes with one of the highest price tags, but that's where the energy model comes in, because if you can prove that actually putting those windows in reduces the heat demand of your building, you basically need a much smaller heating system, which means you spend less capital cost on that, and you put it into the windows, which means you've got less ongoing costs as well as less initial capital cost. So windows is the first one. The second one is the form factor. So often I see buildings which are just unnecessarily complicated. You've got the basic plan, whether it's going out in lots of different directions, but also in the third dimension. So there might be cantilevers or bits poking out that again look really cool, but essentially are making a very complex building. And the more sort of surface area you've got, like if you stand like this when it's really cold, you're going to be cold. So that's why when you're cold you huddle up like this. So the less surface area you've got, the less complex the building is, the more thermally efficient it is, and it saves you money. It's a no-brainer. It basically, if you can make a building look cool, that's simple, it's cheaper for the client and it's more thermally efficient. So looking at uncomplicating your building is a key thing. The third one is airtightness. Now, airtightness is still something that I know people are wary of, don't fully understand the difference that it makes, but it's huge. It really is huge. When you get to the point where you've put a reasonable amount of insulation into a building, and it's actually less insulation than is currently in the code, if you make the building airtight, it will make it so much more thermally efficient. You're basically stopping all the leaks. The analogy I would give is it's a bit like having when you're in bed and it's cold outside and you've got your quilt on, but you've got a little gap and the air is getting in and it's basically making you cold. That is what most buildings are like, and there is another post I am doing which is on the biggest air gaps that you have around your building. But typically speaking, depending on how airtight the building actually is, but every time you increase or halve the air tightness, you're basically looking at about a 20% increase in the thermal efficiency of the building. So the fourth one, now this one actually, you could easily call it the first one, because I'm seeing it across the board on all buildings, is overheating. Almost all buildings, and in particular homes, are overheating. They're getting to a point where in the summer and often in the shoulder seasons, they're just too hot. And what happens is you have this wonderful view that the architect has allowed for, and these big glass windows that are basically got the curtains closed throughout certain times of day. So you're losing that view because it's too hot. And what's happening is you're actually often trapping the heat then too. The heat's come inside, and so you're not actually making the home cooler, and then you've got to chuck on the air conditioning, use up way more power, and you're still uncomfortable. So it's huge, it's not properly understood, and there are energy models, there's just sun study models that you can do that would make the biggest difference when you to the design of the building. It's really, really important and will make one of the biggest differences to your comfort in your home. And the last one is thermal bridging. So thermal bridging frustrates me because it's still not something that is fully covered in our building code, and people, generally speaking, don't understand it. But it's happening. You might put in, a wall full of really good insulation, but have a huge amount of timber in that wall, which means that you've spent all this money on this thick insulation or this thick wall, but you've got these thermal bridges, which is the areas where the cold is transferring from outside to inside. So if you look at a building in the winter, especially here in Queenstown, you might see the studs on the outside of the wall, which is because that is the point where the heat is basically going from outside to inside. That's a really obvious one, but there's lots of hidden ones. One I saw recently, which was really frustrating, was where a slab had been insulated, because down here now we should all be insulating the edge of our slab. Some are still not, or they're done very, very poorly. But this slab had been insulated, and then it had a concrete upstand above that insulated slab edge, which basically negated all of that cost with that insulated slab edge. And this was a high-end house, which really, really frustrates me, because those people buying that house think they're getting something way better than they are. So thermal bridging makes a huge difference, and again, it depends on the complexity of the building, it depends on how many there are, but most buildings are littered with thermal bridges, and it makes a much bigger difference than you would think it would. So they are my top 5 things to look at. If you want, as I said before, if you want a document that just gives you a bit more information about this, then send me a message and I will send it to you, and contact us if you want an energy model, if you've got a house being designed, or if you want us to design a house, because if we're looking at it from the start, we're thinking about all of these things, and you're getting a completely different building. So I hope that was helpful.